Bonjour and welcome. I'm John Pereira, President-elect of the Canadian Pain Society, and it is my honor to interview Dr. Rebecca Pillai Riddell, Associate Vice President of Research at York University. In 2020, the Canadian Pain Society awarded her with the Pain Mentorship Award, and this interview was conducted shortly after her win last year. Dr. Pillai Riddell, congratulations.
I think it's one of the biggest honors I've ever had. I think that my graduate students and trainees that I work with through different networks around the world are really the center of my research life. So to be acknowledged for an award like this is definitely a privilege.
This is not the first award you have won for teaching. What does mentorship mean to you?
Different people have different tempos, different people have different skills. And so you can still hold the high standards that you have and want to help them actualize their potential. But how we get there is very different student to student. I think when you're working with trainees of any level, this is a particularly fruitful approach.
When you mentor someone in pain, there are often key ideas that you want to convey. For our listening audience, what are some of the key ideas that people need to understand about pain and pain research?
I grew up in Ken Craig's lab, and so the social aspect of pain isn't just an important factor. I think it's a critical factor to understanding pain responding. To understand the infant in pain is to understand how they're reacting to their caregivers in a pattern of distress response relationships over time. So ultimately, that means that you can't understand the infant in pain if you don't understand how the caregiver has reacted to that infant in pain.
And so, would you recommend that we treat both?
I think that that's really upholding infant mental health principles, and I bring that into pain. And so the idea that you would be trying to manage an infant's pain through working with the caregiver is a critical way. So definitely focusing on both. There are strategies you can do directly with an infant, like rubbing the infant, EMLA, but there's also a lot, and that's a lot of what we do in my lab, is trying to understand how we can optimize caregiver interactions with their child to help reduce pain, acute pain, and chronic pain. We're just moving now into the neonatal intensive care units. So it's a new area, but even more important, I think, is the caregiver's role in how hospitalized infants develop pain responses in a context or an environment where there are so many repetitive procedures.
What advice would you give to caregivers listening to this interview?
We put out a paper, a randomized control trial, where we talked about the ABCDs of pain management. We had studied over 2,300 vaccination appointments, and we watched what caregivers were doing naturalistically with their babies and what resulted over time, because we had followed these babies over the first 5 years of life into preschool. And what we kept finding was that the parent behavior is most powerful in being able to mitigate or moderate how children are distressed before the needle, and then which will result in how much pain they express after the needle. And so the ABCDs of pain management was really born out of that. And so ultimately, the A is about assessing anxiety in the parent and making sure that they come in and calm, especially with young children. They take their cue from their parent. And the more distressed, we know for sure, the more distressed they are before the needle, the more distress and pain they're going to experience after the needle. So we want parents to be calm. We want to encourage them to take a B, which is a belly breathe. And we say the ABCDs. The B is for belly breathing, which really engages a couple of deep breaths, really helps parents slow their heart rate. And again, with the babies, parents often have their children right against their chest so they can hear that heartbeat. And so having a nice calm heartbeat, having a nice calm approach, it changes your voice when you're calmer as opposed to more stressed. And then the C is about bringing your child in for a calm, close cuddle. So I cheat there. There's 3 C's, but the idea is that you're calm, you're bringing your child in close. This is what we talk about at the attachment system in our lab. And so this attachment system is triggered by distress, and it is alleviated or relaxed by being in close proximity to a caregiver. So that calm, close cuddle. And then D, when the child is beyond its peak anxiety. So this is the challenge, is that when you try, distraction is very efficacious for children, but if you do it too early, it can actually increase distress. So you just have to wait until that peak distress. It often takes about a minute in younger children, and in older children, preschoolers, it can take up to 30 seconds. It tends to be a bit quicker, but you, after that peak screaming, and you can always tell as a parent by looking at their eyes, are their eyes open or closed? And so I like to tell parents, if their eyes are open, they're open to you. So it can be turned, it's time to take a turn at distraction. But knowing that if the child gets more distressed, you go back in to see the calm, close cuddle. Parents don't have a lot of time. And so that by just enacting the ABCDs, you do a lot to manage your child's acute pain.
This sounds like a very powerful approach, simple and easy to remember. How widespread has its adoption been?
I think one of our most recent integrations to get widespread was working in partnership with the Hospital for Sick Kids. So they have a pain hub. It was a privilege to work with partners, Danielle Ruskin, who's also a Canadian Pain Society member. And we led parent management sheets that are in the pain hub at About Kids Health. And so we've integrated that. So in terms of uptake now, we kind of have this national platform.
Dr. Riddell, you've given us a really powerful way of advising caregivers regarding what to do. Can you share some tips about what they should try not to do?
So they're all F words. And we purposely did that to try and help it stick in people's minds. An example is having a frustrated face. And so when you have a frustrated face, or you're angry at your child, or you're criticizing your child because they're crying, you have to take a moment and know that this is actually a genuine thing. You've poked a baby, you've put a stinging liquid inside their body, they're scared, they don't know how to process it. Another thing that happens, we call fashion first. And so it's in the vaccination context when parents are actually trying to quickly dress their baby and get them out the door instead of taking 1 or 2 minutes to soothe their baby. So they're kind of prioritizing getting their kid dressed. So those are just two things that we have amongst our publication that came out about the ouchie.
You're the Associate Vice President of Research at York University. When it comes to pain research, in what directions should we be going, and what advice would you give to pain researchers today?
The biggest advice that I would give is that multidisciplinary collaboration is the key. We're so fortunate to be collaborating with neurobiologists, for example, at the University College London, researchers like Mariah Fitzgerald, Lorenzo Fabrizi, Laura Jones. It's been such a pleasure to work with neurobiologists, engineers, and mathematicians. We're all working together to try and build an AI solution to infant pain assessment. This project, funded by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, not any one of our teams could have approached this alone. I think that the collaboration helps us ask questions we didn't even know to ask because we would have been in our disciplinary silos.
How far away are we from artificial intelligence providing us with this kind of data and information?
I think one of the dangers of AI is that if this becomes integrated, it takes away a really important thought process for clinicians. If people are trained in the future to read the AI algorithms as opposed to actually looking at the patient, it changes the dynamic. There's this danger that they will be more dependent on the equipment than on the infant in front of them.
Tell us about the Ouch Lab. What does it do?
The Ouch Lab is the opportunities to understand childhood hurt laboratory. And so we're at York University in beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Our lab is about really understanding caregiver influences on the infant in pain. And now as we move into the neonatal intensive care unit, we're really focusing on not just the assessment, but the phenomenon of pain in the infant. So we're getting, with the help of neurobiologists, a truly biopsychosocial approach.
As you look back at pain research and reflect upon the many changes that have occurred over the years, where do you see this evolution going? where do you see pain research in 20 years, in the year 2040?
This idea of pain assessment and being able to disaggregate the physical, physiological experience and the emotional experience. I think they're so intertwined for us right now. I don't think we can truly talk about one without the other. But I do wonder, as cortical mapping gets more precise, can we understand the distress and measure its component compartments more orthogonally or separately?
What advice would you give to trainees listening to this interview who are thinking of a career in pain research?
Do it. It's fascinating. I think that pain is an enigma in the way that we want it to be. There's the brain and the body, but there's the mind that brings in a component that is so idiosyncratic to the individual that it will always be a source of further questions and interest to be able to fully understand what leads to the responses we have over time. I think that it's so multidisciplinary by nature. And I love it. I think that gets back to the award itself, is that I do love mentoring. I do love building infrastructures to help people develop their research skills and talents and to contribute to society with what we learn in academia. And so do it.
If you could have one wish to improve pain research in Canada, what would it be?
More money. I think that we were really blessed for many years with some generous training grants for pediatric pain, these huge training grants that really built a generation. And I was a part of that generation that the government invested in. And it resulted in, I think it was 2012, in pain, in pediatric pain particularly as well, being the top research cluster in Canada across all areas and disciplines. And I think that we have such a strong foundation with the pioneers of the field. And I think Canada has such a fantastic reputation, and it has so much potential to elevate science globally.
Before we started this interview, you mentioned that you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start working. Tell us a little bit about your day.
I'm a mother as well. And so I have certain no-go periods in my day that I need to connect with the kids. I need some time to think. And so the best time is to get up at 4. And right now, my kids sleep until 8. So I get actually 4 hours in. And then I'm with the kids for an hour. And then I start my workday from 9 to 5. And then I'm catching up on emails from 5 to 6 with the kids from about 6 to 10. And then bedtime. Whenever I can get up early on the weekends, I do as well to sneak things in. I am as passionate about research, and I also am passionate about research leadership and being involved and having a voice in how research is done, both at an institution and being able to now have a voice kind of nationally as a leader in a university. And I have to say, as a woman of color, I think it's really important that people who are diverse actually start populating leadership in different ways. And so I think that's a mission of mine as well, is that it is challenging at times, but I definitely want to see representation in leadership in Canada. And I don't see it so much right now in research leadership. And so I want to be a part of that change.
This is a very timely discussion regarding diversity, inclusivity, and representation. Tell us, what are some of the things that need to be done to encourage greater diversity?
I think that even coming into my role as AVP, I was able to have the privilege of being the leader for York to build its Canada Research Chair's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Plan. And we have really great leadership at York, and they allowed me to take that work and integrate it into other aspects of hiring at York University. If I could give one tip to leaders or to labs to understand the lack of diversity and what it has meant to people, I would recommend the book, The Equity Myth. And there's a chapter that talks about the dirty dozen. It's the 12 ways that people who are marginalized are disadvantaged in academia. It's really the systemic racism, the systemic bias, sexism, gender diversity, all of these sorts of diversities that marginalize individuals that have nothing to do with their intelligence, their capability, their ability. But yet, when you start kind of moving through the ladders, you try and figure out, why aren't there more female full professors? Why are there not more out professors, leaders, research leaders, presidents, vice presidents? That one chapter was such an eye-opener.
You've worked with so many researchers and collaborated with so many people. Is there anyone you specifically want to thank?
There are so many people to thank. My intro to the field was with Ken Craig. I didn't fully understand this whole pediatric pain idea or area. And he gave so much intellectual freedom, and he challenged me so fiercely throughout that time. I really didn't see myself as a scientist. I really didn't see myself as a researcher. And I think my time with him and the opportunities he gave me and the intellectual stimulation of that caused me to have to become a researcher. I do think that when I was working with Bonnie Stevens and her team, that was a really amazing opportunity. She focused on infancy at that time, and having her expertise and her kindness and her mentorship, I learned so much. And I think just all my colleagues across the country and around the world, they just make it so much fun.
Dr. Rebecca Pillai Riddell, you are the Canadian Pain Society 2020 Pain Mentorship Award winner. Thank you for joining us. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You can learn more about the Canadian Pain Society, our vision and mission at canadianpainsociety.ca and on Twitter @CanadianPain.